Good morning, everybody. Let's get cracking on this Tuesday morning. I'm joined by somebody who, if you were a listener of CliffCentral in our first few years, you will recognize this man. He was a regular contributor, had his own show. His name is Jack Motlanthe, and he is with us. How are you, Jack?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, big guy?
Good, man. It's nice to see you. What's been happening with you? Give us a little update. Tell me what's new.
We somehow survived the pandemic. That's first and foremost. But just trying to figure out life after that, like considering the fact that we somehow were convinced to stay home beyond our better judgment,
Right. Yeah.
And, just basically trying to survive ever since. But I've been good. I've been really, really good. No complaints.
Excellent. There is the lovely Lebang Hosanna. People were asking Lebang. They thought that you decided either you were much too busy with all those many children, or they thought that we got rid of you. None of that is true. So here's Lebang, who is back with a vengeance.
Morning. It feels good to be back. Gareth, no, obviously none of that happened. The real enemy here has been Eskom through and through. They have successfully screwed me over every Tuesday from 6 till 8:30 for the last 4 weeks. It's almost uncanny. I'm like, maybe today it won't be this time. Oh no, it will be this time. So I just had to fight back, and here I am. I've missed you guys way too much.
So it's actually personal with Eskom for you. It's personal.
It's deeper than rap. Like, I'm Gatvol, and I know everybody's Gatvol, but I'm like, I'm a different level of Gatvol. So I don't even want to see them. I don't know.
I don't know. Is everyone Gatvol? We don't behave that way. We certainly don't behave that way.
What? Tell us what to do then. What can we do?
Truth be told, I really don't like the idea that a lot of us have that we should be blaming the government and all of this stuff. Like, the people that work at Eskom are our family members, like our older brothers, older sisters, cousins, all of this stuff. The people that actually literally keep the lights on are everyday people just like you and I. And we should at least be encouraging those people to point out where things go wrong. Like, I refuse to believe that the wrongdoing that is done at Eskom that led to the load shedding crisis that we have now was something that could not be stopped by ordinary, everyday citizens. I find it hard to believe.
It probably could have been stopped, but I think that time is gone now. Now it's too far gone. I mean, like, we've let it slip so badly. Look at this clip. Here's the president, right? Listen to what he says. He's trying to exonerate, at least he's trying to gain himself a little ground here. He's like, oh no, but I try my best. Just listen to what he thinks his job is, to acknowledge things. Listen to this.
This has been a huge challenge. And I know of no president who has led during the type of pandemic that we've had, who was hugely challenged as our people were dying, as unemployment was rising, the economy was going down, the unrest that had an impact on our economy, and the type of floods that we have had. So all these challenges have come one after another, and they have been addressed. And of course, people can judge whether that has been sufficient or not. But I have been very clear in saying, having been elected, I must address all these challenges that face our people, and have done so to the very best of my ability in terms of addressing all these challenges. A number of people often say, President, you got into office at the wrong time. You get into office to even address state capture. And yes, that has been my lot as a president. but I have given it the best shot and will continue to do so in service to the people of South Africa. Thank you.
Well, I saw just yesterday he's accepted an invitation to go to the UK on a state visit. How exciting for him! So he gets dinner and he gets to talk and he gets to visit and meet and shake hands and ride in a
And
carriage.
crack little
With
jokes.
King Charles. Okay, so let's break down what this president of ours says. Okay, he says, "Oh, I just want to say, you know, I have done the best to the best of my abilities." He says, "Well, if that's true, then your abilities aren't very good."
Yeah, that is not a shining light for his abilities at all.
Correct. So then
Exactly.
he lists 5 things. I wrote them down. First one he says is lockdowns. Well, you said it just now, Jack. As I recall, lockdowns were a government response to the pandemic. So you did that. So we can judge you. We can judge you and your government on that one. Okay. So you failed at that one because lockdowns, while they may have saved a few lives, and who knows how many lives, because you don't know, right? Countries that didn't lock down, countries that did lock down, virtually the same number of people died because viruses do what viruses do.
Exactly.
So what did lockdown do that didn't have anything to do with the deaths? I'll tell you what it did. The economy has been destroyed. Unemployment has gone up. People's lives have been irreparably changed. Supply chains have been disrupted. All of that is not because of the virus. It's because of the lockdown. So we will give you 1 out of 10 for lockdowns. Okay. Then the riots that he spoke about. Do you remember that? He brought up, he had the temerity to bring up a riot. Why did we have riots? Wasn't that an internal ANC thing that brought about those riots? Weren't the main ringleaders in those riots ANC people, disgruntled members of the ANC, people who were in a faction fight in the ANC?
It's interesting. As you're saying that, I remember a very prominent ANC member was just about to go to jail as those riots happened.
What are the odds? The timing of it all, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to start our Tuesday morning talking about politics, but let's just go get it done. So what would you give him out of 10 for the riots and the way that they handled that? Because
that's definitely a -5, surely.
-5.
It has to be on the negative side. It has to.
It did way more bad. I can't. Even 0 is too much. 0 is way too much.
All right. So then at this stage, he's sitting at -4 as an average. Okay, but let's look at Eskom as the third one.
Oh no.
So is Eskom, Lebang, what happens if you don't pay your Eskom bill?
Oh no, then I don't have lights. They call me immediately. I'm screwed. And if it piles up for months and months and months, I'm even more screwed because that's changing. The bill's going up. My salary is not going up. The expenses are going up. So,
but what's the arrangement? Like, what's the arrangement with you and, let's say, your doctor? If you go to your doctor because there's someone who in the family is sick, and you say to your doctor, "Can you help us? I need this child to get better." And your doctor then looks at the child and says, "Oh, okay, she's got a throat infection," and then supplies some medicine, and you have to pay. Your part of the deal is to pay. You don't have to also know how the doctor does his job or consult to the doctor. You just pay because that's what doctors want.
That part is none of my business as long as my child gets better and I've paid for the service. It's literally a transactional thing. The end.
Right. So with your Jack, with your relationship with Eskom, you have to pay and they have to what? Provide electricity.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it would seem that simple.
Theoretically.
Have they provided electricity?
Negative.
And here's what pisses me off, Gareth, right? I buy prepaid electricity, right? For argument's sake, I'll have 30 units before the scheduled load shedding. When the electricity comes back, I'm sitting on 25.
How's that? Yeah.
So not only do I not have access to electricity that I paid for, but somehow it disappears extra whenever the electricity disappears. I don't know how that
How,
makes sense.
Sophie? How?
I
That doesn't
honestly don't
sound
know
right.
how that makes
So in
sense.
other words, you're not even okay. So you first of all don't get the electricity that you are paying for, plus they're taking some that you did pay for that they didn't even provide. Yo,
You know what I mean?
all right. Okay. So what do we give him for ESCOM out of 10? This president who's complaining, oh, that's my lot in life. Poor me. What do we give him?
Yeah.
Out of 10?
Look, in the comment section, lovely lady D says we should give them a -20. I think she's onto something around
Very
there, just because
Right.
of the
Very true.
level of just pure bollocks
And
and
Jack,
the inconvenience.
as you suggested earlier, like for Lebang, this is personal. So she's going to
Yeah.
give it -20. All right. Then obviously the floods. No one is to blame for the floods. The floods are not Cyril's fault. As much as you want to complain about him or anything else, he can't be blamed for the floods. But their response to the floods, I suppose he can. I don't know if that's been very good. I don't know if it's been tremendously awful. But I would say let's be fair and let's be reasonable. Let's say that they're still busy with some of that. Shall we give him 5 out of 10? Maybe 6? I don't think more than that's deserved.
You know what? Here's my thing. If the infrastructure was the way it was supposed to be, i.e., storm drains, that kind of stuff, perhaps this disaster could have been avoided.
Okay.
So I'm feeling a little generous, so I'll give him a 2 for that. I'll give him a 2.
Yeah, I was thinking around 1. Yeah, like again, it's not their fault that it happened. But again, what Jack said, if the infrastructure was a little bit better, but beyond that, their response was all talk and no action. If anything, that one should just go to like gift of the givers and the people who we know for sure were on the ground doing this work.
Point.
So just for the sake of, this one was God, it wasn't y'all, you can get a 1.
All right. So then the last one is state capture. Now, whose fault is that? Is that the people of South Africa? Is that Lebang Hosana? Is it Jack Motlanthe? Is it Gareth Cliff who did that? Is it everybody who's listening to us this morning? Is there anyone in the comment section who's responsible for state capture? I somehow don't think so, huh?
In fact, no, there is. It's all of us, Gareth. It's all of us. Those of us without cushy jobs, without air-conditioned offices, without subordinates going into the unnecessary numbers. It's all of us. It is all of us. I mean, personally, every time I catch a taxi these days, I bump into a Gupta. So it's easy for us to have these chats. State capture is our problem. It's our fault. Of course it is.
Because they also are bearing the brunt of all that state capture, and they're living hard lives in South Africa. They're not at all in Dubai in a gated complex with billions in the bank that is ill-gotten. So what would you give for state capture, maybe?
Ooh.
Out of 10 again.
I don't know. Out of 10? Wow.
That to me is the lowest. I would say that's the lowest.
Infinity is a number, right? So I can go to negative.
Let's say,
truth be told, I mean, I find it so. If it wasn't this painfully sad, it would actually be hilarious. The idea that the very same, like a friend of mine mentioned this the other day. When we were kids, we were told that we were the future. Now that we have kids, the very same people who said that we are the future are still in power and they're still singing the same song. So
I'm going to say -20 there as well. Let's go with another -20. That gives us -43 out of 50. -43 out of 50 gives them a -0.86. So, I mean, I'm doing rough calculations here. You multiply that by 100. Gives them a -86%. Negative,
and that's
86%.
just us. That's like what we think. If we literally get the opinions of every single, not every single, but most South Africans who have some sort of common sense, it would be curtains. But the real sad thing is that it's just not even funny anymore. It's just almost uncanny how these people are purposefully screwing this up for all of us because they're not going to be here for the next 30 years. They're literally on their way out. We are the ones that have to deal with this mess. And it's like, yo, guys, this is tired. This is absolutely exhausting. We can't make jokes of these things anymore. We can sit here and point them out while you guys just continue to get fat and go on your trips and go to the UK, go wherever, chance and marry with your fellow presidents. But the rest of us are stuck back home with the actual BS. It's just not funny anymore. It's not a joke anymore. Now we're like, yo, we are in the shit. We are knee deep in this crap. How are we supposed to even like maneuver anymore? It's crazy. It's crazy.
All right. Well, you know what? We're not going to solve that problem this morning, but at least we have, as the president said, we've addressed it. Because that's what he says his job is. If you listen to that clip again, he says we've addressed. By the way, that clip was shared by the presidency. So they think that's good PR. They wanted us to see that. That's not something I pulled off of some website that hates the president or, someone online who doesn't like him. He says his job is to address things. Now, you can talk, because what he means is talk about them. So clearly he thinks if he talks about things. So we've addressed it this morning. We've done our job. Let's move on to other things. I want to talk to you, Jack, because we haven't caught up in a very long time.
And at least we were entertaining about it.
So just remind those people who, and you could include Lebang here, you were with CliffCentral.com for years right in the beginning. Remind everybody what you got up to, because you've got some interesting updates of your own. Yeah. That I'll have to drop in because you're very humble about this. In a second.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember this, but I had actually started making some music in those couple of years. I dropped a full-length album in 2020, did really well. To my surprise, I was really humbled by the fact that I did no marketing whatsoever in Europe. And my highest listenership is in Europe, actually, like Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. It's the weirdest thing, but I'm grateful nonetheless.
Awesome.
Right now, I just got done with a EP that I'm going to drop. It's called I Feel Good, presented by Evans Excessive. I worked with, as the name suggests, his name is Evans Excessive, and he's an amazing producer from Pretoria. So we came together and started working on that. I'm dropping that on the 17th of this month. And as far as my passion project is concerned, that is covered. In terms of day-to-day work, though, I'm working for an AgriTech startup. It's called Desert Green. And essentially what we do is this. We buy produce from small-scale farmers, and then we supply informal traders, as well as ladies and men that cook at places like taxi ranks and so on and so forth. So what we're trying to do is bridge the gap between people that can't find a marketplace when they do have produce, and people who are then forced to buy at high prices because there's only one place they can get their produce from. So we're trying to bridge the gap between those two groups of individuals.
That sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, I see so many ways that will fill a gap in the market in this country. We need people to be thinking about that stuff. People are talking about how food insecurity is going to be a major issue all over the world, and you can already see. We had this issue with sunflower oil a while ago. I didn't know, you didn't. Probably most of us didn't know that the Ukraine supplies so much of the world's sunflower oil, which we all use for cooking and so on. And you have a disruption like you had because Putin invaded the Ukraine, and then suddenly, the price of sunflower oil goes sky high, and that's if you can even get it. And we live in a country where we obviously have, very fertile soil. We've got lots of very, very smart.
In fact, 60% of our, sorry about that, like 60% of our country is arable land. Like we can farm on 60% of our land. And instead we've been encouraged to build super malls and convenience malls, and no one's talking about farming. Like, I grew up in Meadowlands, Soweto, and according to my uncle and people that were around at the time, the entirety of Meadowlands was a peach farm. There isn't a single peach tree in Meadowlands right now, which is, it's kind of counterintuitive in a sense. Like, I mean, can you imagine? So the idea for this, for Desert Green, came up because two of my friends grew up in Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga, and their yards are pretty large. So their homes and their backyards there's enough space for them to plant 3 or 4 different crops. So you can imagine, as a kid that grew up in Gauteng, when a friend of mine from Mpumalanga tells me, yo, man, we've got 5 different fruit trees in my backyard. It's like, how isn't that everyone else's reality? Why is it that we are kind of forced to all run to the same stores to buy high-priced food and all of this stuff? Why aren't these systems being set up?
Well, I mean, especially when you talk about fruit and veg, we don't, Lebang and I have actually discussed it on this show before. You don't actually need a huge amount of space. Like, you can grow enough stuff in a pot plant on your windowsill for a small family. And we're talking about things like tomatoes and lettuce and things like that, which obviously is not, it's not great, or if that was all you had to eat. But you can grow spinach, you can grow mealies. People can grow simple stuff. And I'm afraid we've got so used to like the shop down the road that we've forgotten that we have the ability to do this stuff.
I just saw a really cool.
Sorry, Jack. Do you guys remember that guy in Pretoria who, I think he got arrested for planting cabbages at his front gate? Do you remember? It was like last year or the year before. Like, literally, this guy had just planted like cabbages or some sort of fresh produce by his gate, but because it was like publicly visible, literally the cops just came through, took it all away, and said, "This is illegal. You're not allowed to do this." Blah 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 blah. So essentially, I don't think they want they want to sort of like allow us to have the ability to produce our own things. Essentially, farming isn't fashionable. Farming isn't, they haven't made it something desirable that all of us can access or should have access. For them, it works better for us to just be consumers. We just wake up, go to the shops, buy, come home. Wake up, go to the shops, buy, come home. They're not gonna, advertise. Yes, he planted on his favorite. Yes, that's Cherry Fig, and she also remembers it. It was just atrocious. Like, this man is clearly using his own little property to try and empower his community. So he's gonna plant a couple of cabbages, and they literally came back and they were like, "No, you're not allowed to do this." So that is the problem, Jack. The core is that they don't want you to know that you can do this for yourself. They prefer to keep taking every little bit of money that you've got, even if it is a little,
possibly have,
and you must just consume. That's why they keep churning out malls, they keep churning out stores, but they'll never churn out, hey guys, here's a training center on how to build your own veggie farm in your little garden patch. Oh, no. But there'll be another shop. There's every corner has a new shop. That's just the sad reality of it.
Just to add on to what you're saying, what we're trying to do as Desert Green at some point is have an app where you could have your small scale farmers put onto the app how much produce that they actually have. And anyone on the other end will then be able to go onto the app and buy as much as they want to buy. What we will facilitate is the movement of the crop from the farmer to wherever you might be, right? At the same time, we're hoping once we can get our ducks in a row and we can actually get the app to work the way we want it to, we'd like to be somewhat of a farmer's assistant in your pocket. So even as you, Lebang or Gareth, while you're at home and you'd like to plant fresh produce and you're not too sure how to go about it, you're not too sure what fertilizer to get, we're hoping at some point that the app would be able to give you a step-by-step process as to whether or not you are heading in the right direction,
Yeah.
You could take a picture of one of the leaves of the crop And if it's not growing well, the app should be able to tell you what to do and what not to do. So I'm hoping with enough time and the proper investment, we'll be able to give this to the country essentially. And wherever you might be, you'd be able to plant fresh produce and grow it yourself.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think Jack's just frozen on his side, so let's hope it's not load shedding that's crept in over there. So a couple of comments that have been made here. Government wants to control your food source, so grow your own, says Rusty. Steve says, but surely your balcony growth will only feed you for a while and take months to get to that point. Well, I mean, we talked on this show about, you know how you get those shopping bags from Woolworths, which anybody who can still afford to buy at Woolworths. If you get those bags, you can plant things in those. Apparently, things grow really well in those. And I have attempted this. I'll let you know how it goes once they start growing. But yes, of course, it takes a while. This is why you've got to plan ahead. You know, you can't just do things and then expect them to suddenly come about and work. So you got to plan ahead with these things. Carl says, I'm sorry, you're referring to the man who was locked up for lockdown contravention, not the Pick and Pay Mafia. I'm not sure, Carl. That was Lebang and seemingly
that is definitely a different person.
Yeah, in the comments.
Yeah, no, he literally did get locked up for growing fresh produce on his own land. But yeah, Gareth, I think it's also just about like trying different methods. I mean, if there's anything that we should have learned in the past year or two is that anything can change at any moment. If we go through another lockdown, we're screwed again. Essentially, in the point where we're screwed again, we want to be more prepared. So if you get into the habit now of at least attempting to grow your own, blah, 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 when that lockdown happens, at least like you won't be affected by, that. You can then just continue on with your life and grow your own. And at least you've started that habit. What I think the thing is now is let's at least be prepared so we don't have to repair. That's the opportunity here. And yes, it sounds a bit schleppy. Now I must go get seeds and sit and plant. And yes, you at least have to try something. So when we're faced with this again, we'll be like, oh, well, at least now I'm saving this much from my grocery money. And all I can do is blah, 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 blah. That's literally what essentially the idea is. And with the app that Jack is talking about, you can be guided in the process. You're all in it. We're all in it together, essentially. So you're not in a place where you don't know what you're doing. You can literally get this information. It's available. Just try is the thing.
Well, I mean, lovely lady Lee says here, our government are deliberately disempowering South Africans so that they can remain reliant on them for as long as possible. It's politics. I suppose that's part of it. Propaganda and Rusty are both saying seeds will one day be the new currency. Well, I mean, it's not that out of the question. Apparently, the follow-up to that guy who you were talking about, Lebang, is he didn't plant on his own land. He used a neglected public curb or servitude. But so what? Because if you look at this, I mean, I was driving through Johannesburg yesterday. I had meetings, and I noticed the sidewalks and, those islands in the middle of the road, all of them, weeds. And so if someone planted veggies there, at least they'd be useful. Right now, they don't look like anything. They look like absolute shit. So why don't they plant things that we could eat in there? That would probably be a better idea.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, Steve says proper seeds needed to grow decent crops. Seeds from an old tomato don't grow well. And Sherry says you only need to buy seeds once. Every crop, you save some seeds and you replant them. Well, that's what our ancestors used to do. So how hard could it be for us to do that with modern technology, with modern irrigation, with the ability that we have now to figure these things out? And as you say, Jack, technology, right? I mean, that's the key.
Yeah, and it seems nowadays everyone uses technology for the completely worst thing. Like, you would swear Google only exists when you're just trying to prove a point. Like, the only time you'll hear someone say, "No, I'll Google it," is when they're trying to prove something. Outside of that, when you're actually supposed to be using it, no one does. It's the strangest thing.
Correct.
And it's also like, just because it's online doesn't mean it's facts. That's the scary thing. It's like you'll Google it, but like, what if you're Googling nonsense? Like, anybody can literally just type it up there.
And typically what I've seen with people is they'll Google stuff, and the first article they see is like, okay, yeah, that's gospel. It's like, no,
Dude.
you realize Google just puts things together for you to review. Like, it wasn't made for you to be lazy.
Oh, just by the way,
and more than that, yeah.
On this issue, I saw yesterday some woman from the UN was saying, when it comes to climate science, they're in cahoots with Google. They've had meetings with them, and Google and the United Nations have agreed that they will make sure that the United Nations information goes to the top of your Google search. So in other words, if something's been okayed and approved by the United Nations, that is the true science, and that will be at the top of the Google search results. In other words, Google is in on this with them. And you know why they're doing this? Because she says, and I kid you not, these were her words. She goes, "We own the science," she says. "We own the science." So it will be, whoa. Doesn't that sound like tyrannical nonsense to you? Now, I'm not a climate denier, okay? But my God, when you start talking like that, what you really mean is, I know better than you. Right. You're a bunch of idiots. And I'm sorry. I don't know that I trust some bureaucrat from the UN more than I would trust whatever Google delivers, because it's the most interesting story, or whatever the algorithm throws up at me. I think I'd rather trust that, frankly.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, that is such a grandiose thing to say. We own the science.
Own the science?
This really? Really? Wow. Wow,
man! They've really got some kahunas on them.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about it, obviously, there's a responsibility on all of us to verify whatever we find. And Google is not verification; it's just aggregating whatever information the algorithm chooses to churn to the top. And sometimes they manipulate that, but sometimes it requires you to actually speak to someone who is the most qualified in that subject, or to figure it out for yourself. I mean, I see so much nonsense. There is so much stuff going on at the moment in America. Everything in America has to be political. So right now there's a hurricane that is lashing. Right now it's lashing South Carolina, Charleston. But obviously for the whole of last week, it was smashing Florida and parts of Texas. And, the people on the right could not help saying, well, there's no such thing as climate change. And the people on the left could not help saying, you're getting these hurricanes because of climate change. And of course, both of them are completely wrong.
Yep.
But it's got to be about politics. It's not. And you know why it's politics? You know why politics is the subject that everybody chooses? Because you don't have to have a brain to have a political point of view. Everyone can have a political point of view, because there isn't a right or a wrong in politics. You just choose your position and you defend it to the death, even if you only chose your position 2 seconds ago.
Yeah. Whenever I think of politics, I'm continuously reminded of George Carlin. There's this bit where he was basically pointing out all of the things that we have in common. Like, you would swear, I mean, how do you turn a hurricane into something that's political? Like, you realize there's people who could be losing their lives. Like, let's put all the bullshit aside and let's help where we can. Once everyone is safe, then you can go back to, no, I'm right wing, you're left wing, you're all of that stuff.
Even if we wrote down Cyril's list just now, we all agreed that the floods in KwaZulu-Natal were not his fault, right? We could all agree. The three of us are not stupid enough to think that was his fault. But some people will politicize these things and say, oh, no, it's just, it's got to be something to do with the politics. No, the reaction to it, you can say, is political. But we've got to give people a chance to put their lives together. I mean, people have actually lost their lives in South Africa and in America with these natural disasters.
Exactly.
And the reality is, you've got to look at the numbers. It's not about your personal experience. So apparently the total number of people who have died from climate connected situations, whether it's floods or hurricanes or volcanoes or earthquakes or landslides or whatever, in the last year has been about 7,000, which is still a lot of people, but it's nothing compared to the number of people who died from climate-related stuff in the 1920s, for example, so 100 years ago.
Right.
And if you look at those numbers, because we're getting better at being able to predict these things so we can get people out of the way quicker. There are even things that we can do to try and avoid them. We can build our houses out of different stuff. We're getting better at dealing with the climate. So humans aren't victims of the climate the way that we used to be. And that's worth celebrating. But instead, we're sitting here going, oh, no, it's definitely getting worse. There's nothing we can do. Which is stupid.
It's extremely stupid.
There's a certain like a cadence that comes with chaos for political discussions. If you see an opportunity to talk crap about something or someone, particularly in politics, you need people to be up in arms. You want people to be like toying and freaking, what? How dare they? If there's like a calmness, it just won't work as well. I almost feel as though they wait for the uproar to begin so that they can get their point across. Because if you speak in a room that's like quiet and it's peaceful, nobody's going to listen to you. They'll listen to you when they are in the street holding up their freaking blah, blah, blahs there. That's when you can get their attention. And that is sadly why everything gets politicized. Because, hey, man, if we make the most noise and we point the finger and complain about what they aren't doing, then we'll look like the better guys. Whilst back at the ranch, like none of y'all are doing anything. And you're just addressing left, right, and center. Let's address. Today we'll address.
Hey, listen, I want to very quickly just squeeze in a headline before we get to J.J. Cornish, who's with us this morning to tell us about what's going on the continent. But I thought this might be interesting, and maybe, Lebang, maybe it's you, maybe it's Jack. Let's see. One of South Africa's oldest BEE firms is looking for lost shareholders who it owes 6.4 million rand to. So Brimstone, I don't know if you've heard of them, it's one of South Africa's oldest listed empowerment companies. They are looking for some lost shareholders. They owe them 6.4 million rand in unclaimed dividends. The group say it is they're trying to find these people because when they listed on the J.A.C. all the way back in 1998 at R1.25 a share, there was no requirement for companies to record the basic details of their shareholders. That means that the only contact details that they have are the people's names and addresses. So back then, they were not even obliged to take an ID number or a phone number. So if you think you might have shares in a company called Brimstone, you might receive some money.
Why does this sound like an ad campaign?
I don't know, but I mean, if you it's worth a chance. You could call them up anywhere and say, "Yeah, I'm definitely a shareholder," and see if you get any money.
It was me. It was me. I'm one of them.
I might have been 9 years old at the time, but I think I gave you about $5. Yeah,
I was thinking ahead. You're not thinking ahead.
Right. So let's turn our attention to J.J. Cornish, who is, of course, a regular guest on our show. Every couple of days, he comes in and gives us an update on what's going on the African continent. And today is no different. It is brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School. We're looking at what's happening on the continent of Africa. J.J. Cornish, what a pleasure to see you. How are you?
Bonjour. Lovely to be with all of you. And I'm very grateful to your listener who asked about Zambia so that I had something to do. Well, I Googled, I'll be honest. I did Google.
Let me play that. Let me play that for everybody. I think this was Pitleng, who is a regular of ours. And Pitleng wanted to know what you had to say about Hichilema. So listen to this.
Hi, team. Pitleng here. Can I request that you ask J.J. Cornish to do a whole segment on Africa analysis based on Hakainde Hichilema, the new president of Zambia? There's an interesting thing that he's doing that side where everyone else in the world, inflation seems to be skyrocketing, but Zambia's inflation is still remaining in the single digits. And I'm interested particularly in JJ's analysis on the decision that the president has made with, or the agreement he has made with the International Monetary Fund, where Zambia has kind of like cut off subsidies on fuel and on agricultural produce that were always there in order to repay some of its loans back to the IMF. Can he do like an analysis between that and Greece in particular? Because I think Greece also went through similar measures.
All right, so JJ, there's the basic from him. We've heard about very, very interesting economic indicators coming out of Zambia. So what do we know about this? Let's start with that.
Well, as I do when I tell my grandchildren stories, I say, are you sitting comfortably? Good, then I'll begin. Once upon a time, there was a country in Central Africa, very reliant on its copper. 10% of its GDP was mining, and there's still problems with mining. But what happened was Zambia 2 years ago with the COVID became the first African country to default on its debt. But they got the man in charge, in fact, disparagingly called the calculator guy. Hakainde Hichilema is an accountant. And he went to see the IMF and he got one of these loans. They called the BEC loans, extended credit facility loans. And it's $14.5 billion. So that means they could start to pay their debts back. Now, half of their debts go to the Western countries. And in between, the most of them will go to Britain, France, and China. So this is what they've got to repay. And he started working on that. Now, the fact is, if you take IMF money, and Lebang used the word cojones, so I'm sure that I can do that. And that's where the IMF hold you when you have their money. And that's what they did to Greece. The Greeks stopped breaking plates, but started throwing cups at the television, I think, every time they mentioned the IMF. But he's done a remarkable job. Certainly, he has turned inflation around from 24% 2 years ago to 9.7% now. And the kwacha is the best performing African currency against the dollar. So he's done remarkable work. But if this is going to work, and I'm giving you the bottom line, we need to have debt forgiveness by these Western countries. Because Zambia can't simply pay that debt. The 1.4 billion comes over 38 months, so it wasn't just one big package that he got and fix everything, but it'll come over 38 months. They've taken about 800 million of it already, and he is doing quite remarkable things. Hichilema, we look to him as an exemplary president in the region, and we're very proud of what he's been doing. But countries like South Africa, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Ghana, all having galloping inflation, sadly, to see what he has managed. He's brought in fiscal measures that are really important. For example, he's removed the duty on importing cattle, important to the agricultural sector in Zambia. Also on chicken breeding, removed the duties that they're paying. So stimulating that kind of growth. He's a guy with foresight and a guy with a lot of thinking. Now, basically, these extended credit facility debts are supposed to foster higher growth, more resilient growth, and more inclusive growth, for everybody in the country. And certainly the way he's been driving it thus far, it has been doing that. But I get back to the fact that if it's got to work, because he can't, if it's not going to just extend the nightmare that Zambia was going through, when you take money like that, you have to get some kind of facility, some kind of debt forgiveness from the West to make it work in the longer term. The mining sector, as I say, is still in problems, and they are 10% of the country's GDP. But more power to Hakainde Hichilema for what he has done. And I think other African countries with a problem could look to that. But, then you require, once you've done that, you require enormous discipline. He has stopped government departments lending. You can't simply take that, spend it, repay your debts, and then create new ones. You've got how
much does Zambia owe those countries?
Well, in terms of, I haven't got a global figure for that, but it's certainly in that sort of order, $2 billion to those countries.
If it's $2 billion, I mean, you know, JJ, the Biden administration just recently announced they'll forgive $500 billion in student debt. These are people who took on that debt themselves. These are people who could probably afford to pay it back one day because they've got degrees. These are the richest people in America, because you don't get to go to an American university unless you have money in the first place. And even if you don't have money and you get some kind of a loan, usually for the people who've got bursaries and things who are at the poor end of the scale, someone else is paying for that for them. So it's amazing. They can give $500 billion in student debt forgiveness, but Zambia has to worry about $2 billion. You know,
not too many Zambian voters for Joe Biden, though, you see. And every one of the students being forgiven, you can bet will become quite an ardent Democrat in the future.
Yes, you're right. It is that cynical. And I'm absolutely sure that's why they forgave that money. Okay, so that is very helpful. Thank you very much. It's useful to know this stuff. But while we're talking about Zambia, just tell us about some of the other things that are going on over there, because, you know, they're a hop and a skip north of South Africa, really very, very tightly packed into that area. Botswana, we've got Zimbabwe, we've got Zambia, and then obviously north of that, we've got the Congo and so on. But how important is Zambia, and what sort of country is it? We've discussed them at some level of granularity, but maybe you can give us some updates.
Well, you know, Zambia is a very integral part of SADC. The thing I like about Zambia, and I dealt with the Zambians very extensively and maintained that relationship when I was a correspondent to United Nations. They were the experts on dealing with apartheid South Africa, I felt. But today, they are the most knowledgeable. When you want to really know the African opinion on Africa, ask a Zambian, unalloyed, critical to a sometimes faulty degree, but they will tell you what is wrong in South Africa, and they're right about that. So I speak to Zambians regularly just to find what Africa is genuinely thinking about South Africa, not this giant at the bottom, this gateway to the rest of Africa. What is really going on in African minds about Africa and about South Africa?
All right. Well, are there any other updates you'd like to throw in, since we've got a little bit of time this morning, about other things that are happening on the continent?
Well, yes, you know, you spoke about the Congo, and there's a country very, very close to my heart. I've been there as an election observer a number of times. I've visited there with ministers, and you know, it's one of the countries that I believe will change the face of Africa. 11 neighbors they have, and they will change the face of Africa when things work there. And they haven't been, to be frank, and they're still paying. You know, I laugh at people who say, how long are we going to keep blaming apartheid? How long are we going to keep blaming colonialism? You read King Leopold's Ghost about the DRC, and you'll understand that they are still to this day paying for the colonial horrors visited on them by the Belgians. You know, to a lesser degree, obviously, but there's still parts that Belgium can be blamed for. Well, they've got some stability in the east of the country. You know, when you cross the DRC, you take your passport with you. It's like going to another country when you go to the east, and they've got martial law in parts of the east that have brought stability. So right now in the DRC, they are having a COP27 meeting. You know, COP27, the climate conference in Egypt next month. Well, there's DRC, the Congolese have got about 50 countries, including the rich countries, and they are meeting in Kinshasa, and they're holding the foot of those rich countries to the fire, saying, you know, you broke it, you've got to help fix it. You've got to, and they're putting pressure on them, which is going to be done in spades at COP27. You've got to pay for mitigating the horrors, the climatic horrors that are being visited upon us at this time. So it's a very interesting thing that they should do it, and I'm delighted that they have the security. They certainly have the facilities to manage it. Kinshasa's quite a remarkable city, and they have facilities to hold a big conference like that. So let's hope that something can come out of that they can go off armed with something meaningful to take to COP27 next month.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm not going to get excited about these climate conferences because they don't seem to result in anything, especially when the big countries like China and America and India don't want to sign them. I mean, what's the point of small countries like the Congo, or even, little European countries like Finland signing onto these things? China is by far the world's biggest polluter. And if they're not interested in signing a carbon emissions agreement, then what's the point?
Gareth, let me tell you that they can sign it, because they do sign it. But it's when they get home whether they implement it. Now, as I say, at the United Nations, I can remember Canada being the most upright, righteous, anti-apartheid country there was. And, they were the conscience of the Western world on issues like South Africa's occupation of Namibia and apartheid. Well, at the COP in Durban, which was I forget the number COP it was, I attended that. At the end of it, Canada signed, and when the foreign minister got home, they reneged on what they'd signed right there. And that was the Canadians that did that. I wrote a piece then saying I'm never attending another one of these multilateral conferences, certainly on climate, because this is what happens. You all get together. You brief the journalists who write and say this is what's going to happen. This is the breakthrough this time. And we all become complicit in this fairy tale. This is what is going to happen. And then the participants, the politicians, play along with us because they keep it running. And then it's supposed to end on Saturday at 8 o'clock. And then on Saturday at 7 o'clock, they turn the clock off. So they negotiate through the night into Sunday, sometimes all the way into Sunday evening, and then suddenly, quotes, save the conference with an agreement that nobody expected. Well, this has happened every single time. It's a farce, and we journalists are playing along with it. And I, as I say, I'll never go to another one of them because, suddenly you're realizing we're sitting through the night, supposedly wondering whether we'll get an agreement. Well, they play it like that so that it looks like it was a hard-fought agreement. The fact is, when they get home, some countries, America always signs up to it. But when they get home, do they implement it? Look at Paris, which was supposed to be, that's the one that followed on ours. And it was supposed to sort of underpin and sort of concretize what was achieved in South Africa, and it still hasn't been properly implemented.
I love the way that there are people who actually think they're going to make a difference to the climate by signing laws. Like the climate of Earth is going to be changed by laws, and especially when they talk about taxes. We'll just attach a carbon tax to things. That's going to make the climate change. It's not. And countries like ours and the Congo and others in Africa that need to develop are probably going to have to develop on carbon-based fossil fuels. Those other kinds of technologies are not as readily available to us here, and they won't supply us. Eskom's a case in point, with enough of it anyway at this point. So why are we being punished by Greta Thunberg's dream? Doesn't seem right to me.
Well, the Durban COP was very, very amusing to me because, we were all talking about carbon emissions and coal-fired coal-fired power was akin to sort of Nazism, but then they could see some merits in Nazism compared to coal-fired power. And here was South Africa hosting the conference, and we do nothing but coal-fired power. But they said, "Oh, well, look, in your case, we're prepared to make an exception." But the farcicalness of it all is absolutely astounding. And I think journalists who have nothing to offer except their credibility are in danger of losing that every time they go to one of these conferences.
Virtue signaling has gone like out of control. No one actually cares about getting things done. You would say, like, people are busy running on treadmills thinking they're moving, but you're not moving. You are running in place. That's all you're doing.
Anyway, I mean, listen, maybe these laws will change. Maybe we can come up with a law that will stop, the sun from eventually turning into a red giant. Let's see how they do on that front.
Well,
Just pop a tax on it.
Didn't we send a rocket up to put the sun out of kilter the other day, or was it something else? But we did do something with a rocket.
We tried to get one of those asteroids that was heading. It wasn't going to hit Earth, but NASA wanted to see if they could knock it off course slightly, which I think they did. Of course, now there's going to be.
That's what the North Koreans are trying to do as well, and nobody understands them.
There's some alien planet somewhere that wasn't in that comet or that meteor's path, and now, some alien's going to be sitting there on his front porch waiting. Oh no, we've checked. There are no asteroids heading our way for some time, and then suddenly some huge burning piece of rock will come through because we've knocked it off course. So who knows? I just think it's all ridiculous.
Imagine sitting there, you're in your cozy, sun tanning, and then suddenly Joe Biden sends a rocket up. Boom! You have to rush in and put your puffer jacket on. Quick time.
Have cooled down the climate. All right, JJ, it's very good to have you on. Thank you as always, and thank you for answering that question from Pihleng. If you've got a question, then please, guys, let us know. You can get hold of us on contact@cliffcentral.com, or you can just WhatsApp us a voice note. This is the number, and we will pass it on to JJ or whoever else we have on the show that we need from time to time to give us an insight into a particular issue. And you can ask any question. No question will go uncovered. No question will go ignored. 071-783-6214. Thank you very much, JJ. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you.
JJ.
Always a pleasure.
Ciao, JJ.
JJ Cornish and Africanalysis, which is brought to you by the Johannesburg Business School. It is 7:00. We'll be back with a whole lot more in the next hour. Don't go anywhere. Jack Motlanthe is here. Lebang Hosana, Gareth Cliff, and you. Just because it's about technology, connecting your business to the rest of the world doesn't mean you need to send rockets to space and use complicated solutions. Want to simplicate things? Well, join Jaco Voigt, who is the CEO of Catalytic, on the Unbundled podcast. With skin in the game and a keen focus on educating and assisting you and your business, Jaco decodes all the aspects of connectivity, security, and cloud solutions. Unbundled is brought to you by Catalytic and is available on CliffCentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right. We are live. It is a Tuesday morning. It is already the 4th of October. Jack Motlanthe is here. Lebang Hosana, we're all back for you this Tuesday morning. We've got lots to talk about. I want to get into something a little bit controversial just now, but before we get into any of that, there are some other things that I wanted to talk to Jack about quickly, because you have been, obviously, like all of us, spending a lot of time on social media. But I'm increasingly concerned about the way that people are thinking, and the way that social media is affecting the way that we think, affecting our actual thought processes. Kind of, we talked a little bit about this in the first hour when it came to, how Google, for example, has become something that people use as an authority in an argument, but they don't really use Google for the reasons that it might be more useful to them. I mean, there's this vast multitude of information, this extraordinary library which is online, and it's something that drives me crazy whenever I think about it, because I don't say that I'm better than anyone else at this, but I do use the internet, especially for subject matter that interests me, chemistry or history or any of that stuff, and I look stuff up all the time and find the most fascinating information, which I know would never have been available to me if I'd had to use the local library like I did when I was a kid. Do you remember doing that stuff?
Yeah, and I mean, it's like it's a virtual wormhole that you can jump straight into and find out some of the most fascinating things ever. So of late, I've been watching a lot of Dr. Jordan Peterson's videos. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. I recently actually just bought his book. It's called 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos. And when I listen to...
You're a bit late, but welcome to the party, Jack.
Yeah, it took me some time. It really did. Like, you can imagine the myriad of videos and content that is put out into the world. You kind of have to sift through all the rubbish. Like, I would sit there and listen to people make nonsensical points, but because they're saying it passionately, they believe that what they're saying is correct. And it's like, hold on a second. Like, you actually didn't make a point. You're just speaking passionately.
So, let me ask you a
think
question.
You own the science.
You
think you own the science. So let me ask you, because I've interviewed Jordan Peterson once, and I've read his books, and I've been trying to sort out a second follow-up interview with him. But what is it that caught your eye here? And why is this stuff interesting to you? Why are you finding it valuable?
Okay, so the psychology of the human mind has always been interesting to me. I've always wanted to understand why it is we do the things that we do. And with Dr. Jordan Peterson, the way he puts things makes it so palatable. It's easy to understand what he's saying if you're actually listening. I first saw that video, interview he did with Kathy Newman, and her responses reminded me of myself, in a sense that I used to listen to people with an emotional ear. Like, if something they would say did not go along with what my preconceived ideas were, I'd immediately have an emotional reaction to it. And as a result, it was like, is this how I sound when I talk to people usually? And immediately, that's what started the snowball effect of me trying to learn more about this man and his teachings, And as a result, what I've come to understand is virtue signaling is the greatest thing since sliced bread in 2022. Like, you don't actually have to do anything. You just have to say you're doing something.
The superpower.
It's like, I care about people. It's like, okay, cool. I understand that. But you drive out of your home and there's homeless people all over the place. You throw away food that, not that you won't eat, but like, you just don't care about it anymore. So you just chuck it in the bin. And those very same people that you claim to care about have to then go through the disgrace of digging through your bin to get food that you readily throw away. So,
but you go on Twitter and you'll tell everyone what a good person you are.
Oh my goodness!
Oh yeah, no.
Like,
and you'll post a picture. You'll post a picture of you doing something, some good in your life for somebody to prove the point.
You'll hear someone that works for a big corporate company and they're pounding their chest about their CSI projects and whatnot. Like, hey, you realize that they have to do that? Like,
Dude, you just
they
move it
didn't
to
do
the
that out of the
box.
goodness of their heart. Yeah, like
Exactly.
they have to.
All right, I want to ask you both something. So this is going to take us in a controversial direction, but that wouldn't be
I
so
love it.
weird. So, all right,
Bring it
so
on.
Lebang and Jack, let's look at this quickly. I'm going to show you 3 posters for 3 movies that are coming out at the moment. I mentioned this on Instagram yesterday. It got a huge reaction from people.
I saw that.
So I want to know why Hollywood has an obsession at the moment with girl warriors. Okay, we'll start with this Rings of Power. Okay, so Rings of Power is, it's part of the whole J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, and all its prequels. So you've got, in this picture alone, we've got this Galadriel, who's this elf warrior queen. She's the blonde one at the top. Then there's this woman called Miriel, who's the queen regent of a place called Numenor. And then you've got a dwarf queen in the middle, who is also a warrior dwarf, mining magnate, all kinds of things. But it's all about like us, appreciating that the women are the warriors here. By the way, all the men in this thing are regarded as incompetent, with the exception of the guy with the bow and the arrows, who seems to have done some good so far. The rest are all incompetent and seem to have buggered up everything that they've touched, which is a whole separate story, but we'll get to that later. Here is a movie that's on at the moment. It's called The Woman King. Now, this is partly historical in that it has to do with a place called Dahomey in West Africa, where there was a kingdom of slave traders. And that kingdom of slave traders eventually had to depend on a band of women who were the bodyguards of the Woman King in the title of the movie. But of course, because it's women and warriors, Hollywood is in love with it. So just like Lord of the Rings, it's all about girls who fight, which is not a normal situation. Throughout the history of humanity, the only time that women have had to fight is when things have got so completely shit, or when the men have screwed up so badly that it now requires the women to have to pick up weapons and fight. And usually it's at the last gasp of a civilization, because it doesn't take long for whoever the aggressor is in a situation like that to take out the woman army, because women are not good fighters. They just aren't. It's a lie. It's never worked anywhere. It doesn't help anybody. Women have other roles in society. Fighting is an aggressive, testosterone-laden, angry, ugly business, which is why men usually don't want their daughters and their wives to have to participate in war. And then the third one is this one, Wakanda Forever. Again, you see there's one man in that picture. All the rest are these women. And I'm just wondering what kind of a message Hollywood is trying to send here. So you go first. Lebang, you are the woman. I hate to put all this pressure on you. What do you think's happening here?
Jeez.
What is this?
Like, I'm just sitting there like, yo, this is layered.
Are they trying to convince that women are equal to men?
I think first and
beyond
foremost,
that,
we need to firstly realize that this is just entertainment. Entertainment, it is not real life. This is just, for you guys to be entertained, number one. Number two, I'll give you a more personal example. I was sitting yesterday and I got an email for an audition for a commercial that's coming up. And they give you examples of who they want, to cast. They want a combination of people. They want thick women, short women, relatable women, basically. They don't want your typical what Hollywood has, the standard of beauty, the thin, blonde, white girl who just looks so perfect. They don't want that anymore.
They don't want Instagram.
They don't want Instagram. They don't want perfect. They want relatable. They want, just the girl next door type thing who is African. They specifically put African. So I think Hollywood is going through an era or a phase where you guys have been excluding a big part of society for so long. And you have put women particularly in the same type of role over and over and over again. You're going to put the woman in the kitchen. You're going to put the woman in this role of like struggling single mother, or you're going to put in this role of just like supporting act. If anything, back in the day, women weren't even ever cast as the main people. They were always just helping the man look good, making the man say his lines better. So we're moving into a phase of entertainment, and this is my personal opinion, where Hollywood is being forced to put women in these positions of power. Gareth, I agree with you in the sense of, you having all these women just fighting in the front lines. It's getting a little bit played out. But where it's not getting played out is for a young girl in Africa somewhere who can finally see herself in this position. Like, oh snap. So there's room for me in that kind of place, in this entertainment sphere. That's dope. Whereas before, you only saw women of color or even just women in general in specific roles that were very linear. And you'd grow up to believe that, okay, well, I guess then that's all. What we're seeing now, and again, this is entertainment, more room is being made for women in different roles.
Yeah, but it's not just entertainment, because
Sure.
the vice president of the United States is supposedly a woman of color. I mean, the fact that she's probably one of the worst vice presidents in US
ever.
history
that doesn't matter.
is actually making women look bad. It doesn't matter, right? Which is stupid. It's insulting to women. The White House press secretary is a woman called Karine Jean-Pierre. She's probably the worst White House press secretary ever, but she's a black lesbian. So it seems that...
So it's fine. You're ticking a box.
Exactly. So politics, just like you said about ticking a box earlier with the CSI stuff at companies, it seems like Hollywood has spread its stuff to the real world. Because now the White House under Joe Biden, who is an addled old white man of exactly the kind that Hollywood has always cast as the right? They always have a president who looks like Joe Biden.
Yeah. Can you imagine he's
everybody
trying
else
to run for a second term? Like
everybody else comes from central casting. They come from women of color central casting, exactly the way you described it just now. And they are shit at it, and it's not good for women, and it's not good for women of color. And I'm just wondering these movies.
I'm not mad, Gareth. I'm not mad at it. I hear you in that people are doing it for the wrong reasons. Sure, you guys are just doing it so that you can be, a part of like whatever's fashionable, or maybe they're scared of getting cancelled because they can't do. But
Labang,
it's
I'm not upset. I'm watching Rings of Power at the moment. I'm enjoying it. I'm not worried about the politics at all. Here's my question, though. What is this message they're trying to send to young girls? That they must be warriors, that they must be, what is this all about? Like, what are they trying to do to...
Let me throw my hat in this.
Make women the masculine ones. What's this all about?
Let me throw my hat in this. I honestly believe we are fast approaching a time where the idea that there aren't any differences between men and women has become a lot more prevalent. I don't want to put it on, the transgender community, but I think it started there, where nowadays, I keep hearing arguments about how transgender women should be able to play sports with quote unquote biological women, right? How can I put this? The blurring of the lines between men and women is becoming so, for me personally, it's becoming so annoying, because what ultimately happens is you'll have movies like these come out portraying women doing masculine things, and then on a day-to-day basis, you're going to come into contact with these masculine women, and then no man wants to be with a masculine woman. No one, no man that I know personally wants to do that. With a feminine man. Okay, fine, I'll speak for myself. Personally, between two men, there's this underlying threat of violence, which is how we regulate our behavior, right? Between two men. But if I'm standing in front of a masculine woman, violence is kind of off the table from that point, right?
Yeah.
And so having to deal with her masculine energy is going to take a lot of energy from me, which is not something I want to do.
Hold up.
It's not something I want to do. Look, Laban, let's look. To be honest with you, I grew up with feminine women, masculine men. That's just how life worked, right? And somewhere along the line,
your life worked.
In my life, yeah, and it made sense. And there were specific roles that these two individuals had to play, and they were great at it. It worked pretty well. Why that needs to be changed at this point in time is beyond me, because from what I can tell, women can do whatever job they want to do. They can choose not to have children. They can choose not to be married. They can choose. There's so many choices that women have today that they didn't have 20 or 15 years ago that they can use, and
Sure. And I understand why you're saying that, because, from your perspective, this is what it is. And as a person that's not a woman, of course, you'll think that there's so many choices that women have. There's more choices than before. But at this stage, there is not as many choices as men have always had, number one. Number two, dude, if you see yourself, like, Gareth, please pull up that picture again, the woman is king one, the one with all the beautiful women up there. Please pull it up. Dude, if you have a group of young women.
I don't think any of them is beautiful. I love Viola Davis, but the rest I'm a little bit nervous about.
Well, that is Gareth's opinion, and luckily this is the Gareth Cliff show, so he can say whatever he wants. Every single person up here on this poster, Thuso Mbetu, Lashanya Lynch, Sheila Atom, even John Boyega. Firstly, all these people are insane actors, right? But most importantly, I don't think the fact that they are women dressed up in like these Wakari outfits and looking like warriors is the point. The point is, I don't think that's the thing. I really don't think that's the thing.
A warrior becomes a legend. It's all about warrior women. The whole movie is that. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay, have we seen the movie? Let's watch the movie as well first before we make assumptions. But my point is, guys, the fact that these people are dressed as warriors isn't the takeaway. The takeaway isn't go home and be a warrior, young girl. The takeaway is, Doug, go home and do whatever the hell you put your mind to. You can do it too. These positions aren't just for men. They've only been for men for so long that it's our time. Aren't you guys tired of seeing the same people in the same rooms making the same decisions year after year? Number one.
I agree with you.
Let me finish off. This is my last thing. Jack, the world is constantly changing. And you, me, and Gareth are just fossils. We're becoming fossils in this whole thing. We aren't going to understand why there's pronouns and why there's blah, blah, blah. Because it's just not for us. It's for the kids, bro. If we don't keep up with these changes, we're going to be screwed. So sitting and complaining about why things are changing, why can't things stay the way they were, masculinity must be for what, I don't think it's going to work like that. It's not. Things are generally going to change. You decide what side of the fence you want to live on. If you want to live on the side that's like, oh, look at all these changes. Can't things remain they were when I was 4? It's tricky, because that's just not what it is.
I'm personally not opposed to change. I love change. It means there's something that I need to learn as an individual because something new has been brought to the table. Like, even whatever thoughts I might have about any subject, if someone gives me some new information that sheds light on that subject and I need to then change my perspective on it, then praises to that. Like, that means now I know something I didn't know before, right?
For sure.
When it comes to the representation of women in movies, and I don't know about you, but I feel like if we were to go back and look at, different types of movies, I've seen women play all types of characters. For argument's sake, Blade 3, Jessica Biel was one of the, swords wielding. She might not have been the lead. She might not have been the lead.
Blade 3 wasn't the best Blade as well.
Sure. She might not have been the lead, but those characters have always been, thrown around. Like, they've been in the mix. I understand.
Just in the mix, thrown around. Yeah. Never prioritized.
That's why I used the term. That's why I used the term in the mix. I understand they weren't prioritized.
When do we get to the station and get off the train is my question, because it's fine. As you say, this is just entertainment, right? And if you do look at it that way, fine, it is just entertainment. But, women don't work the hard jobs men work. And I mean the dangerous ones. I mean, like construction. I mean, like night shift. I mean, security. I mean, going to war.
Oil rigs.
I mean, all of those things. They generally don't do that stuff. Men's jobs are generally, not all, a lot harder. Men also have to defend the home. And I'm talking about in a traditional sense here, but historically, it hasn't been like it's been a picnic and men have kept women out and that was their biggest priority. Women now are attending university in far greater numbers than men. Women are coming out of university with more qualifications than men. Increasingly, we are seeing women appointed, even if it's just because they're women, to boards and all these. Of course, we need to see some transformation. I'm not saying any of that is wrong, but we've also got to take into context, into consideration, the fact that this is a transition. There's a process of change, and that's why I'm asking this question. What are the movies trying to achieve by showing women in the traditional masculine role? Because there's something about that maybe Jack has got a point about. Maybe there's some kind of agenda, not about just letting girls know you could be anything you want. I don't think there's a single girl who's waiting for Hollywood to give her permission to be anything she wants. I don't think there's a single girl anywhere in the world who's waiting for some stupid fucking fantasy movie to make her feel like she could be an entrepreneur or a mother. I mean, what is this all about? Where does this come from? Hollywood's so important. Do we think girls are particularly stupid that they need Hollywood to show them that they can be anything they want? In which case, why are we patronizing women?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think it's a stupidity thing as well. I think it's as simple as, if you're not going to get, inspiration, right? Or let's just call it like, the go ahead, in inverted commas, from your immediate household, your immediate community, the people around you, whatever. Your next best bet is the things that you see, the things you're consuming. You're consuming media all the time. And if they're only showing you one type of thing, I mean, it's low-key been proven. If they're only showing you that, the white man in a business suit is the CEO of every company, then when you think CEOs, you're being conditioned all your life to believe that CEOs be like that.
How is that any different to people telling you you have to love a movie about warrior women? Because that's what they're doing. It's like we have to celebrate Banyana Banyana. You remember that whole discussion? G-Star just brought it up.
and where did we end up with that?
We ended up. You couldn't name a single Banyana player, but you were towing the line with this. Yeah, we must celebrate the women on the soccer team. When no one watches it, no one cares. No one gives a shit about sports.
Because what's most annoying about, like, okay, I'm sorry about this, but like specifically with sports, I even heard excuse me, I even heard a couple of WNBA players saying that they should get paid as much as men, and I'm like, that is nonsensical. How about you fill up the stadium? How about you fill up the stadium and then you'll get paid as much as you need to get paid? Like, let's be honest, as Gareth just mentioned, none of us knew any of the Banyana players. The only Banyana players.
I never claimed I did. Gareth literally said to me, "Do you know any of them?" And I was like, "I don't," but it doesn't mean that they suck.
No.
That's not what we say.
My point is, it doesn't matter whether you know the names of a Banyana player or not, but it's the same nonsense. They're trying to sell you a story that just doesn't have any legs.
Have you seen the movie? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen the movie.
I didn't have to watch it.
You're probably not even going to watch it. Listen, I just think we're bashing the concept of a powerful woman and just women in power. Like, men get so defensive. Oh my gosh, why must this woman hold the sword?
Hey,
look,
I have no problem.
I'm for great characters, right? Yes. I don't care who plays the character as long as it's a good movie, right?
Dog, all those people, some of the women in there have even won Emmys. Didn't you so greatly win like an Emmy? Yes. But here we are saying, she mustn't be holding a sword because she's
here's what my problem is personally, right? If you're going to make a movie, make just a movie. Don't sell the narrative that you're making a movie about women warriors. Like, it shouldn't be the headline.
Because
just say you're making
so much experience making movies. Look at us, all experts in movies.
Tell us you're making an action movie, and the people that star in it are women. Don't tell us,
Jack,
you have to watch this movie.
Me, you, and Gareth, let's watch the movie, and then we can make like a proper analysis of what's actually going on. Because just based off of a cover.
No, I'll definitely watch it. I'll definitely watch it.
That's like okay. Well, we got to wrap up this conversation anyway. I just want to say this: when you have an all-woman army, like in this movie that we're talking about this morning, and by the way, I might or might not go and see the movie. Who knows? At this point, it looks about as interesting as a totally made-up like, some kind of LGBT minority, like Democrat-inspired Hollywood producer's wet dream. That's what it looks like to me. And therefore, I think I'm going to be sold. I think I'm going to be sold a narrative in this movie. But you know what happens when you get an army of women against an army of men? They lose, because men are better at war. They just are. It's like women are better at lots of other things. But war is a men's thing. And I'm not going to be sold bullshit about that. I'm sorry. There's just no two ways about it. And don't say to me, but the Israeli army has women in it. Of course it does. There are all kinds of women throughout history. I've studied history. There are women, exceptional women, who have broken that rule, obviously. And we celebrate all of them. There are these great people in history who've been tremendous, but they are the exception, not the rule. Now we're being told that, oh no, because everything about men, women can do, and everything about women, men can do. And this is going back to your point, Jack. It's like, that's not what we as humans know to be true. It's just bullshit.
And I will not
be sold bullshit. So I probably am not going to hurry up to go and see this thing. If you'd go and watch it for us, and you can tell us what you think, I'll be very happy.
I'll definitely watch the movie.
I think Jack should watch it.
I'm going to watch it. Here's the thing. As I said, I want to watch a good movie. There's a real possibility that how they tell the story is actually a great story. So I'll watch it. You know what I mean?
Viola Davis is fire.
Yeah. Viola Davis is amazing. She's absolutely amazing. One of my favorite movies is Fences, where she plays the wife of Denzel Washington. That movie is breathtaking. Absolutely amazing. You know what I mean? I will definitely watch the movie.
Because she's in the role of just a wife, just a wife supporting. Here she is in a main role.
What do you mean?
Like the lead, alongside fellow.
She wasn't just the wife supporting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, she wasn't just the wife.
What else was she then? Going back to what I said. Going back to what I said about the roles. Yes.
What is the most important job in your life?
It's to be a mother. It's look after my children.
Right. And you know what? That is not just a mother. Just a mother is the most important job. In fact, there is nothing that a man can do that is as important as that job. So I want to just say again, it's fine to save the world and to have all these superheroes with all these powers. And we see all these stupid movies with all these guys and girls with swords and with spears, and they're fighting on the battlefront, taking on, these cartoon characters who can shoot shit out of their shoes. I don't care about any of that. You know what the hardest job in the world is, and the most important job in the world is? Being a mother. And the other one is being a father. And you never see that in movies. Because why? It's become all about men have to be women, women have to be men. There's no difference between these two genders. And it's nonsense. And you know what?
Yeah. Look, the world can change. The world can change as much as it wants to.
But hold on. We need to show young people, girls and boys, that it is actually really good to grow up in a family where you have both parents and they can teach you good things about what the world is. We need to show young women that you need a strong male role model so that they don't get abused by horrible men one day, even if those men are warriors. And we need to show them that women are not there to compete with men and men are not there to compete with women. We're there to support and look after each other. That's what we need to show. That's what you want to show young girls.
On that, we agree. On that, we absolutely agree. Yes. But guys, it's just entertainment as well.
You can't just say it's entertainment. It's not just entertainment. It can't just be entertainment.
Sure. We agree in that the most important thing to show is the value of a household, how men and women both operate. When they come together, they're a team, they're a unit, how a household should operate. If there's anybody who knows that the most, it is me. I'm literally in the crux of that. That is my current life. But what I'm not going to do is be mad at the fact that there is a movie out there with 5 amazing Black actors who are killing it, by the way, and that is a problem. The problem, for me, doesn't exist. In that, watch the movie, do what you need. Your household, your home, your immediate place of interaction, your primary environment, that is where you should get your influence. That is what's important. To say, hey, why is Hollywood doing it? Guys, let Hollywood do their thing. They are an entertainment place. If we're now saying, what are your influences? Your influences are your household.
We've got to wrap this up because we've got to get to a new episode of Blind History. Now, Blind History is not made up nonsense, and it happens to be about a warrior, and it's not a woman. It's a warrior from history, someone who actually existed, called William Marshall. He was probably the greatest knight of the Middle Ages. So if you want to know about, chivalry and jousting and battles in armor and all of that stuff, which sounds like it should be part of, I don't know, Rings of Power or Wakanda Forever, this is where it all comes from. This is the inspiration for this stuff. And the guy at the center of it is a man who managed to outlive 4 kings. He outlived 4 of the 5. He served 5 kings. An incredible story, and something which I think you're going to love today. Blind History. Jack Motlanthe, nice to have you on. Lebang, thank you so much. Good to see you both, and we will catch up next time. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Don't miss it. Here is your latest episode of Blind History, everybody. Are you ready? Yeah, peace out. Cheers, everyone. Here is the latest episode of Blind History featuring William Marshall. Chivalry, jousting, coat armor, knights on horseback, and the great glory of the Middle Ages are mostly made up. The real Middle Ages were a bloody, dirty, brutal, and uncivilized time. Women were mere possessions, land was wealth, might made right, and peasants ate rocks and soil to stay alive. Only the high-born could live a life anything like Sir Walter Scott imagined in his novels. But some once-upon-a-time tales aren't the stuff of pure fiction. In those dark times, there was a great knight who outlived 4 kings, fought countless battles, and was the very epitome of the medieval warrior. His name was William Marshall, and this is his story. We return to the Middle Ages in this episode of Blind History, a time that both Anthony Middera and I love, because we get to, I think maybe because when we were kids, this was regarded as like a really romantic, exciting, adventurous time, where men fought on horseback and wore armor, and women were beautiful maidens that needed to be rescued. And, it's a really interesting time. I think a lot of that probably has to do with like Gilbert Scott and stuff that was made up much later.
The Arthurian.
Yeah. That whole legend of Arthur, and all of that stuff contributed so much to this. But we're going right into the heart of chivalry and medieval pageantry with the character that we're talking about today. Someone called William Marshall, who was, his proper name is William Marshall, 1st Earl of Pembroke. And he came from an Anglo-Norman family, served 5 kings of England during his life, which is quite an extreme, it's an expansive array of time. You've got Henry II, his sons, the young king, Richard I, John, and finally John's son, Henry III as well.
And he was loyal to all of them, no matter how there was 1 or 2 nutters in there.
Amazing.
And he was so loyal to them. But just to start, Gareth, the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, just after he passed away, he said, the greatest knight that has ever lived. And the deeds and titles are such that, you can say that it's still justified today.
Yeah, that was Stephen Langton, who actually ended up being a cardinal. He was the guy who adjudicated at the Magna Carta. So this guy had a good grip of history. And for him to say these things about William Marshall means that, at the time he was regarded very highly. And throughout his life, he really seems to have had both a mix of really good fortune and just this incredible adventurous spirit that very few warriors in history managed to keep up for as long as he did. It's amazing.
Yes, if you look at how his life started, life was really tough. It's if you live to 30, you've done well. Even his dad didn't really care too much for him.
No.
The first known events or hectic events in his life was when Stephen, who was king at the time, I don't know if it was Stephen the First.
Yeah, it's the only Stephen and the only Matilda. It was the big rivalry between Matilda and
the cousins.
Yeah.
So Stephen was laying into his castle to take John Marshall, which was William's dad, his father's castle. And so Stephen got the upper hand, and instead of backing down, he took his son. which was William, hostage. And then instead of backing down, he carried on building his supplies and rebuilding to take on Stephen again, and which was massively high risk. And then he famously said, I have a hammer and an anvil on which I can forge better sons than he. So that's how much he loved poor old William. But,
imagine your dad says that about you.
Yeah. But the incredible thing about William already, and this is the age, we're talking age 6 now, Stephen decided not to kill him. And although John Marshall didn't really listen to him, and he stayed at his court for a while, and that was his first introduction to a king. That was the first king that he got close to.
As a kidnap victim.
As a kidnap victim.
And he must have learned quite a lot, because during that time, which is well known as the Anarchy, or the First English Civil War by some, there wasn't a whole lot of law and order. It was pretty much one of the most violent episodes in English history. And it was also the beginning of the proper medieval era, because only after that, when the Civil War was finally ended and King Henry II, the first Angevin or Plantagenet king of England, took over, did you start having this real sense of, all the things that we regard now as being medieval, heraldry and knights on horseback and the Crusades and all of that stuff. All of that really started happening around this time as well. So William Marshall was born at exactly the right time.
100%.
So of course he had to make his own way in life. He didn't have a whole lot of money. His father was a minor nobleman, so there was always a stretch on the cash.
But also he wasn't the oldest, so he wasn't going to get nothing anyway.
Correct. And the hard thing about being a knight was that you had to pay for a war horse, which was tremendously expensive. You had to maintain the war horse, in other words, feed the damn thing teff and lucerne the whole time. You had to outfit yourself in armor. You had to have a sword, a lance. You used to have maces and cudgels and God knows what else as well. And it was a very expensive endeavor.
Yeah.
Plus, you had to be knighted, which you had to pay for. And the only way you could make money as a knight was by essentially winning at battles and then taking other knights hostage, or plundering by sheer force other people's possessions. So it was kind of dog eat dog and survival of the fittest. He was a big dog.
Yeah, and I think that just talking about what you said, so at the age of 12, he went off to his mom's cousin.
Tankerville.
Back in France now. And this is where he was educated in the art of war and a lot of different things. And at the time, he got his nickname of the Glutton. Because he ate
greedy
a lot.
guts.
Or greedy guts, or the Latin. But he really he must have impressed somebody, because then he was knighted in 1166. So that's the age of 20, and this really basically set him on his way. But 100% correct. Where can you make money? And at the time, there were tournaments, and these tournaments, I suppose it's like our Ellis Park now, or I don't know what you would call it.
This is amazing. These tournaments worked. We see a lot of representations in modern movies or in romantic kind of allegories of what that time was, that it was one knight on horseback with a lance against another knight. That was much later. This was like melee battle. They would actually line up on two sides of a field, a whole lot of knights on horseback and on foot with whatever weapons they could afford, and then they'd rush at each other. And it was called a tournament because they would tourner, they would turn, and then they would go at each other again. And you'd keep doing this until one side won. And then you could obviously capture guys, you could ransom them, you could take their armor, you could take their horse. A lot of people lost their horses. William famously lost his horse too. But he had a specific tactic. He would actually either try and grab the reins of the other knight's horse, which is a very risky maneuver because you're holding your own reins.
Yeah, and pull him out of the circle.
And actually, and take them out and then take over the horse and knock the guy out on the ground. He also had this skill of being able to use his weapons in a downward motion, whether they were swords, lances, or cudgels, and he'd be able to then operate with ferocity from a height. And they became very, very nervous around him in battle because he was merciless.
But also, he was clever strategically, because he would often, him and his team would just hang back and let everybody else be exhausted. Then he would move in and then clean them up. And effectively, that 1 year he captured north of 100 knights.
That's right.
And in his career, 16-year career in the tournaments, over 500 knights. He was undefeated. Nobody ever defeated him.
Yeah.
And he made a lot of money. You know, there was prize money. There was also plenty of ransom money. So he was just an incredible individual.
Well, famously, his master in one of these tournaments was the Earl of Essex, and he said to him, "Look, you owe me a bit of tribute." And his line was, "But Marshal, what are you saying? You had 40 or 60 of them, yet you refuse me so small a thing as my tribute." So he would capture 40 or 60 of these other knights. I mean, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, not scared. Anyway, he became good friends with King Henry II when he'd taken over, and he actually was the escort for Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine when she was fleeing Guy de Lusignan, and he managed to actually fight them off. He was already a hero by that stage in the tournament scene, but now in real battle, he proved himself an honorable man too. And he was lucky because in that particular battle against Guy de Lusignan, he was actually harmed by a big wound. He got hurt really badly on his thigh, and someone took pity on him and apparently gave him a loaf of bread, and that kept him alive. And he used the clean linen that this person had given him to dress the wounds as well. So that saved his life, they said. He wouldn't have made it if that hadn't happened.
I think it was a battle prior to that where this is where he was introduced to Eleanor and to the court of Henry II. He was caught and a ransom was set. And Eleanor paid the ransom because she said, I want this man.
This guy should be on our side.
And also because the young king, which is interesting, this is a very interesting thing in English history, that he wasn't called Henry III. So he was the young king. Henry II had already...
He'd had him crowned.
He had him crowned officially,
but he didn't really have any actual sovereign rights. So it was this bizarre thing where the father and the son were ruling at the same time.
Supposedly. But William was there to knight tutor him, to war tutor him, I think is the better term, and to get him ready for that. And they were close. Everywhere they went, it was Henry, the young king, they called him, and William Marshal together. They were operating together, and that was very important. And then, as you'd mentioned, looking after Eleanor and Henry II.
Yeah. Absolutely. So he was indispensable to the family, the royal family at that time.
Correct.
He did fall out with the young king later on. There were rumors about him having an affair with Margaret of France, who was the young king's wife. They probably were made up. And young King Henry wasn't really much fazed by it because he thought at that point that it was highly unlikely that William was having an affair with his wife. But he kept him at a distance anyway. And the two of them kind of fell out. And he was removed from the young king's service. Then he got involved in this big fight between Henry II, who was still king at the time, and his three sons, Richard and John. I'm not going to mention, there was Geoffrey as well, but nobody's really paying attention to him at this point. There was Henry, then it was his son Henry, then there was Richard, and there was John, and they were always fighting with each other. And Eleanor would take up sides with her favorite son, Richard.
Yeah, it was a vicious brood.
Henry II obviously had his favorite too, which was John. And they always were fighting with each other. They were like a pride of lions. And you've mentioned this in a previous example where the strongest one has to survive and the others just get killed off.
The thing was, so Richard and John at this time joined the King of France to take out Dad.
Right.
So it's hectic stuff.
Yeah, it's real betrayal.
Yeah. And William now, together with Henry II, the dad, now needed to take this riffraff out. And he actually, in the battle, he dehorsed Richard I, which later on would become Richard the Lionheart. So
That's
he must just show how impressive this guy is. And he could have killed him, but he didn't. He refrained from actually killing him, and he let him go. And then later on, Richard never held a grudge at all. He looked after him very, very well.
See, this guy was such a powerful ally to have that it wasn't worth making an enemy out of him. And when the young king died, because he died before his two brothers or his father, he begged William to fulfill a vow and take his robes to the Holy Land, where he wanted them essentially in a ritual committed to God, so that he would join as a Knight Templar and he would, obviously have an easier passage into heaven. And William Marshal did. So upon the young king's death, got onto a horse, traveled all the way down to Marseille, hopped on a boat, went to the Holy Land, at which point Saladin was busy conquering Jerusalem. He was at Acre, the famous castle at Acre. All of this stuff was going
King
on.
Guy. Was it called King Guy?
I think Baldwin. You're thinking of Baldwin the Fourth. Baldwin the Fourth, who famously was had leprosy, and this was all going on while. I mean, all these stories come together in the life of William.
Yeah,
and we're only at the beginning of his story, because after that, obviously, he went back, was back in the favor of King Henry II, as you've pointed out, managed to quell and tame the young lions, his other children, and by then was well established as being an important man in the English and French court.
Yeah, and then so Henry died. Henry II died, and Richard became king, and he was with then he served Richard I.
That's right.
And Richard I, I think most of us know he spent very little time in England, and when
5
he was
months altogether.
Yeah, so at that time, William was there protecting his realm, and especially with John getting quite antsy. So that's Richard's brother. John really wanted to take over. John was an interesting personality himself, and so he looked after the realm while Richard was away.
And he also got married at that time to someone called Isabel de Clare, who was the daughter of Richard de Clare, who was called Strongbow. And he was the Earl of Pembroke. So actually they inherited the title through his wife. He was later created Earl of Pembroke.
Oh, so that's right. So it was William, Earl of Pembroke. Correct.
So eventually, King Henry II's youngest son, John, who they called Lackland, I'll tell you why in a second, takes over. Probably the worst of the Plantagenet kings up to this point. The guy just lost every piece of land.
God, unraveled completely.
The whole empire fell apart. I mean, from owning, 2/3 of France, effectively, under Henry II and Richard, John lost it all.
Yeah, he just had a little garage somewhere, I think, in Calais or something.
He even lost the crown jewels. And thank God for him, William was still around, because William was defending Normandy and trying to keep it all together.
And once again, loyal as can be.
That's right.
Except
that he was there with the barons at Runnymede when the Magna Carta was
100%.
signed. And William was one of the few English earls who did remain loyal to King John. It was William who he actually entrusted on his deathbed to make sure that King Henry III would ascend to the throne. And it was William who took responsibility for the king's funeral and burial at Worcester Cathedral. Now, interestingly enough, King Henry III came to the throne at a very young age. And if it wasn't for William Marshal at that point, it was quite possible that the whole kingdom could have fallen apart. The French were looking very greedily at England. There were attempted invasions. The barons were obviously still very antsy post-Magna Carta. So it was a very, very tricky time. And if William hadn't been there, if William Marshal hadn't taken care of young King Henry III, highly unlikely that the subsequent reigns would have taken place.
But during the time, of King John's reign, he didn't have a really, really strong relationship with King John, but loyal as always. Yeah. And he was one of the creators of the pen Magna Carta. So he was instrumental in putting that together as well with the barons. So he did play his role in...
Well, he had respect from both sides.
Yes,
which was something nobody had at that point. And
agreed.
I mean, by the time he took over as regent when King Henry III came to the throne, he was 70 years old, which in medieval times was a long life. I mean, nobody really lived that long.
But effectively, Gareth, without the name, he was King of England.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have criticized his regency, but it seems that more or less he ran things extremely well. The finances were brought back into order. He started rebuilding the army. He made sure that the king was tutored properly in all of the arts of chivalry and knighthood and all of the things that William Marshal had learnt during his quite long life and that were considered to be hugely important to a medieval monarch.
Yeah, and that was the 5th monarch that he was supporting. And then famously he went into his final battle at the age of 70, which is just insane. It's like thinking in today's terms of somebody going to battle at the age of 95. It was just incredible. And he was undefeated in that battle. It was more of a civil war battle, but nonetheless, then he passed away 2 years later.
And he passed away. His final wish was to be admitted into the Order of the Knights Templar, Obviously, having been to the Holy Land, this was massively important to him. He is still buried in the Temple Church in London. His tomb can still be seen there, which, again...
I've seen it.
You've seen it.
Yeah,
you
the
must have seen
effigy.
it just recently.
Yes, 100%.
And they actually unveiled a statue of him in 2022 in Pembroke Castle, which is quite cool
In
because
Wales.
that would have been his castle, part of his estates when he was invested with that title.
But he was physically insanely fit, just naturally fit. But he said in the end, I cannot defend myself from death.
Well, that's true for all of us, I think.
Yeah.
But through his daughter, he's actually ancestor to both the Bruce and Stuart kings of Scotland. And through his granddaughter, he's the ancestor to the last Plantagenet kings, Edward IV and Richard III.
Oh, I didn't know that.
All English monarchs from Henry VIII afterwards descend from him. So all of the current and most recent monarchs going back all the way to Henry VIII descend from, have the blood of William Marshall.
That's good
in their
blood.
veins. It's good blood. I just don't know whether some of them would be as good at fighting as he was. But yeah, what a guy, huh? What a night.
What an incredible. Love that story.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Blind History. Every episode is available on the CliffCentral app, cliffcentral.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the next episode,
There was a devout Muslim, and he just brought so much good to that region, revolutionized and modernized the area. A lot of his buildings, his mosques and universities still stand today.